Us now, and a first on CNBC interview is Hawaiian Holdings CEO Peter Ingram. Great to see you, Peter. Thanks so much for joining us. So talk us through that hit from Delta. Was it single month specific or throughout the quarter?
Well, we started the quarter really well. We had a very strong July, and we've really seen, up through the first half of the year and culminating in July, the domestic part of our business recover not only to 100% of where it was before the pandemic, but even beyond. And then as we saw the Delta variant cases start to rise the end of July and the early part of August, we had a decline in bookings. And later in August, the governor in Hawaii discouraged people from traveling to Hawaii, given the cases that we were seeing and the increase in hospitalizations in our community. And that really hurt us through August and September and hurt bookings into the fourth quarter. But we're already rebounding from that. By the end of September, bookings are pretty close to fully recovered, and we're starting to make up the ground we lost in terms of bookings for the fourth quarter. So we think we're on the mend and moving in the right direction. And I think this is a short-term setback. It really doesn't change the long-term trajectory of our recovery.
We're also, of course, Peter, about to see travel between the U.S. and Europe open up on November the 8th. Is that actually potentially, at least in the short term, a negative for you, as it provides leisure travelers in the U.S. Another option that they have been starved from for the last year or so?
I don't think it's going to be a negative. I do think people, really have a strong desire to travel for leisure. We've seen that play out over the course of this year with all the pent-up demand being realized. And candidly, international is a big part of our business, not to Europe, but in the Asia-Pacific region. And we're excited about the fact that as vaccination rates are rising in Japan and Korea, Australia and New Zealand, the conditions are falling into place for a really strong recovery for that part of our business, which has been dormant for 20 or 21 months at this point. And we're really keen to getting back there. We've announced new service to Sydney, Australia, or the return of our service to Sydney, Australia, for the first time since March of 2020, starting on the 13th of December. And, we're keen for policy restrictions on travel to start lifting in other of our important international markets, particularly Japan. And as that happens, we're positioned for a strong recovery in the international side of our business, which has really been missing here throughout the pandemic.
Peter, oil prices have been marching higher. Jet fuel costs, no doubt, going up. What's going to happen to airfares?
Well, ultimately we need to cover the costs, and we all consume jet fuel in our operations. So when those underlying costs, and particularly fuel, is such a big component, particularly for long-haul travel, that's going to put some pressure on costs. But it's up to us as managers in the business to make sure we're managing down the other costs that we have greater control over.
Peter, what is the latest in terms of passengers being willing to listen to the rules on flying? Is that eased or escalated once again?
We haven't seen a recent escalation. I think earlier on in the pandemic, there were a lot of challenges with compliance with the face covering requirements on airplanes. We haven't seen, for the most part, we haven't seen the worst of it, although we did have an incident recently where one of our flight attendants was assaulted on a flight, and we were pleased to see that handled by the authorities on the ground when the airplane returned. And I think as we work with the FAA and we work with law enforcement agencies on enforcement, I think people are going to get the message that is not something that can be tolerated in air travel. And I'm hoping that the civility that our guests and our employees deserve in flight is restored as we move forward.